Every empire swears its money is unshakable. Every government insists its promises will outlast us all. History keeps answering no, from Rome to revolutionary France, from the American Confederacy to modern Lebanon. People have woken to find that savings don't buy much, wages don't matter, and the future they trusted was borrowed time. Collapse isn't an exception. Collapse is the baseline. So the real question isn't if financial systems fail, it's how you protect yourself when they do. The most dangerous financial error is believing in permanence. We stare at bank balances and national currencies and treat them like bedrock. But money isn't bedrock, it's trust. And trust can vanish between one sunrise and the next. That's why history is harsh and useful. Every collapse leaves tracks, patterns, warnings, and instructions about what actually preserves wealth and what evaporates first. If you watch closely, you'll see the survivors weren't the most faithful believers. They were the first to question. Byzantium, consider Byzantium, Rome's eastern heir that outlived the West by 1,000 years. At the heart of its economy stood the gold solidus, so reliable that merchants across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia accepted it without a second thought. For centuries, it functioned like a medieval reserve currency. You'd think the empire would have learned from Rome's denarius disaster. The silver coin thinned, plated, and debased into fiction. But centuries later, Byzantium repeated the mistake with gold. Purity slipped. Alloys crept in. The coin grew lighter. At first, no one noticed. Then confidence cracked. The coin that once anchored Mediterranean trade became political theater. Debasement destroyed credibility. The economy lost the stability it had taken generations to build. What survived? Not proclamations, not patriotic paper. Those who stored real gold or land beyond imperial reach preserved purchasing power while everyone else watched their money fade. First lesson, timeless and ugly. States struggle to resist diluting their money. When they do, real value hides in things they can't counterfeit. Shock from the outside. Not every collapse starts with rulers tinkering with coins. Some arrive like a hammer from the sky. Mid-14th century, the Black Death tears across Europe. Between 1347 and 1351, up to half the population dies. Cities hollow out, villages disappear, trade routes snap. But the economics are more complicated than everything breaks. When half the workforce vanishes, labor becomes scarce and valuable. Survivors demand higher pay. Land and food, once scarce relative to people, become plentiful relative to workers. Families with liquidity, silver, goods, or simply the capacity to work suddenly have leverage they never imagined. Estates that once cost a fortune can be purchased for a fraction. Abandoned houses, fallow fields. A buyer's market rises from a mass grave. Sound familiar? It should. During COVID, we watched a modern rhyme. Broken supply chains, governments issuing trillions to stop the engine from seizing, and a spike in inequality. Those with liquidity bought assets. Those living on the edge fell behind. In the United States, housing prices jumped. Equities rebounded almost immediately. Millions struggled with rent. Pandemics redistribute wealth. They always have. After the Black Death, some climbed the social ladder on scarcity's rungs. After COVID, those with cash bought properties, stocks, and businesses that others could no longer carry. The lesson isn't comforting, but it's true. Crisis rewards reserves and punishes emptiness. Florence learns about too big to fail. Now shift to Renaissance Florence. In the 1340s, it was Europe's financial capital, run by banking dynasties like the Bardi and Peruzzi. They lent huge sums to kings, especially England's Edward III, who defaulted during war with France. When the king stopped paying, banks fell. Depositors were ruined. Trade froze. A rich, confident city stumbled into turmoil. Ordinary citizens who trusted great names discovered that size is not safety and reputation is not insurance. What did people learn? That too big to fail is as old and as false as finance itself. Institutions exist to earn profits, not to guarantee your survival. When they fall on you. The echo carries through centuries from Florentine collapses to Lehman Brothers in 2008 and to Lebanese banks freezing accounts in 2019. Survival belongs to those who accept that institutional promises are good only until the day they aren't. Set up for the next act, America's Civil War will make the same point with paper money and fire, and France will show how revolutions can destroy currency faster than armies. The American Civil War, paper promises and ashes. The U.S. Civil War is remembered for battles, politics, and emancipation. But behind the gunpowder lay a brutal financial war most Americans barely understand. Both the Union and the Confederacy learned that a war of that scale required printing money. In the North, the government issued greenbacks paper notes backed not by gold, but by faith in the United States itself. At first, the experiment felt bold, even patriotic. But the more greenbacks flooded the economy, the less they bought. Inflation gnawed away their value, confidence faltered. In the South, the problem metastasized. The Confederacy, desperate for resources, printed graybacks in absurd quantities. By war's end, Confederate inflation hit the unimaginable. Prices rose by thousands of %. Soldiers' pay lost worth before it reached home. Families hauled bags of bills to buy a single loaf of bread. By 1865, their currency wasn't weak, it was dead. In that collapse, paper promises meant nothing. Only tangible assets mattered: land, food, gold, anything real. For the average Southerner, it was devastation. A lifetime of savings turned to smoke. For opportunists with hard goods, it was a clearance sale on wealth. It's a chapter Americans rarely study but never should forget. The U.S. has already lived through a full monetary collapse. And when it came, protection didn't come from patriotic paper, it came from value that inflation couldn't counterfeit. France. When revolutions devour their own money, revolutionary France offers a similar autopsy. In the 1790s, after toppling the monarchy and seizing church lands, revolutionaries issued a new paper currency, the assignats. Backed, in theory, by confiscated property, they were meant to stabilize a nation in chaos. Instead, the government printed them with abandon. Each fresh issue diluted the last. Prices exploded, wages couldn't keep up, the assignat turned worthless. Farmers refused to sell food for paper, demanding silver or goods. In Paris, bread riots returned. The revolution devoured itself. The winners weren't those holding patriotic paper. They were those holding food, gold, or property, things governments can't replicate. For the average Parisian, the lesson came too late. Promised value is worth only what others still believe. When trust breaks, savings don't shrink. They vanish. Asia's Echo, 1997. The debt that drowned nation. 2 centuries later, the same lesson crossed the Pacific. In 1997, a speculative attack on the Thai baht triggered a regional cascade. Thailand had borrowed heavily in US dollars, confident its peg would hold. When it snapped, foreign-denominated debt became unpayable overnight. Investors fled. Currencies across Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea collapsed in sequence. Economies contracted. Unemployment soared. Governments begged the IMF for rescue. The true victims weren't hedge funds. They were ordinary families whose savings evaporated, whose mortgages doubled in cost, whose jobs disappeared. And yet the pattern was painfully familiar. Those who held dollars or assets abroad survived. Those who trusted local currency drowned. Nations dependent on external debt were forced into austerity. Meanwhile, global institutions scooped up regional assets for pennies. What looked like a local collapse was, in fact, a global wealth transfer. The rhyme echoes from Byzantium to Argentina. Debt in foreign money is a death trap. When the storm hits, it's not the creditor who drowns, it's the debtor. Modern mirrors. Lebanon, 2008, 2020, 2023. The pattern should be clear by now. From France's revolution to the Civil War to modern Asia, paper dies, debt chains nations, and trust is the first casualty. And collapse isn't ancient or far away, it's happening now. In Lebanon, between 2019 and 2021, banks did the unthinkable. They closed their doors. Depositors woke to find accounts frozen, withdrawals capped, and their currency free-falling. The Lebanese pound lost more than 90% of its value. Lifetime savings became pocket change. People lined up outside banks begging for access to their own money, only to be told it was gone. Not just the poor, middle-class families, retirees, doctors, engineers, anyone who trusted the system were wiped out. The lesson was merciless. Your bank balance is not a treasure. It's a loan you've given to an institution that can decide, in a crisis, not to repay. Those who survived best were the ones who had diversified abroad, held real assets like gold or property, or simply kept cash outside the system. Everyone else was trapped. If this sounds distant, it shouldn't. In 2008, Americans watched their homes foreclosed and pensions gutted, while the very banks that caused the crisis were rescued. In 2020, trillions were printed to keep the machinery running, a lifeline that inflated asset prices for the wealthy while ordinary wages flatlined. By 2023, regional U.S. banks collapsed almost overnight as depositors lost confidence. Too big to fail revealed itself again for what it has always been, a fairy tale we tell ourselves until the doors slam shut. So how do you protect yourself when everything collapses? History proves there is no single recipe. In Byzantium, it was gold. After the Black Death, it was liquidity cash to buy abandoned land. In Florence, it was refusing to trust giant banks. In the Confederacy, it was tangible goods. In France, it was food and property. In Asia, it was avoiding debt in foreign currencies. In Lebanon, it was escaping the banks before they sealed their vaults. The pattern changes, but the principle doesn't. Survival lies not in blind faith in paper or institutions, but in recognizing what holds value when illusions burn away. Here's the paradox. Collapse is both tragedy and opportunity. For the unprepared, it's ruin. For those with resilience, liquidity, or unprintable assets, it's a once-in-a-generation chance to buy value at fractions of its former price. After the Black Death, peasants became landowners because there was too much land and too few hands. After 2008, those with capital bought homes while millions lost theirs. Protection isn't only defense, it's positioning. In every storm, someone is selling under pressure. The prepared become the buyers. But wealth isn't only what you own, it's what you can do. The baker who could still bake, the craftsman who could repair, the farmer who could feed a village, the merchant who could move goods across borders. These people didn't just survive collapse, they rose through it. In every crisis, money loses meaning, but production never does. People still need to eat, build, trade, live. Those who can meet real needs don't stay poor for long. The deepest protection isn't faith in governments or hope in banks. It's the combination of real assets, real skills, and the awareness that illusions always crumble. Every crisis transfers wealth from the many who trust to the few who prepare, from paper promises to tangible value, From passive savers to active builders, history has shown this pattern again and again. The question isn't if everything breaks, it always does. The question is, will you be among the many left holding promises or among the few holding something real? History doesn't repeat, but if you ignore it, it will crush you just the same. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History holds the answers. I'll show you where to look.